Okay, so this lesson's all about conditional statements. Most often you'll see these in like an if-then format. So just looking at this one quickly, we have if right here, and then, a hypothesis, and a conclusion. In the example, if a polygon is a triangle, then the sum of its angles measures 180. I had you for bell work go through these and just kind of determine if they are true and false. Conditional statements don't have to be true or false. It's just more of the format. So for the first one, if yesterday was Wednesday, then today is Thursday. That is true because Thursday always comes after Wednesday. I should use a pen so that way it shows up better. So first one is true, and again, you don't need to explain or like write down the explanation, but that's the explanation. Yes, Thursday always comes after Wednesday. Then for the next one, if an angle is acute, then it has a measure of 30 degrees. Well, that's false. An acute angle could have a lot of different degree measures. It could be 45 degrees, it could be 15 degrees. It doesn't have to be 30 degrees, so that's why that is false. For the next one, if a month has 30 days, then it is June. It could be June, but it doesn't have to be June, so that's false. There's more than just June that has 30 days in it. And then for the next one, if triangle ADC is a right triangle, then the Pythagorean theorem is valid for triangle ADC. That is true. Pythagorean theorem is valid for all right triangles. Number 5, if a polygon is a quadrilateral, then the sum of its angles measures 180. That is false. I don't know if you remember from like middle school, but a triangle has the angle measures add up to 180 degrees. For a quadrilateral, they actually add up to 360 degrees. That comes up in a later chapter. You may remember this from middle school, but it is false. And then the last one, if points A, B, and C are collinear, so that means that A, B, and C fall on a straight line, then they lie on the same line. Yeah, true, just by definition. If they're collinear, then yes, they lie on the same line. Easy enough? Okay, so now we're going to continue. I'm just going to kind of skip around throughout this lesson and just point out things that may be important. Okay, like I said, these packets are a lot to go through. I'm going to try to focus or like show you where to focus your attention. Until we actually practice this, it may not make complete sense, but just kind of go with it for now. Right, Maya. Okay. So a conditional statement, I had mentioned it's the if-then statement. It has a hypothesis and a conclusion. It's often in the if-then form. Doesn't have to be. If we were to abbreviate, if P, then Q, and we'll see this a couple times, and then the symbols would be like this. So if you see the P, then Q, or P implies Q, that is for a conditional statement. Okay, so here is a couple examples. Hypothesis and conclusion. All birds have feathers. This would be the hypothesis, and then conclusion. Okay, moving down. Negation. Negation is where it's like the opposite, so it would be like not P, and I know that doesn't make sense yet. And then there's a symbol that has a squiggly line P, and that means not P. And let me show you what it would look like. So if you're given this statement, the ball is red, the negation would be the ball is not red. So you're just saying the opposite. Or if you're told that the cat is not black, the negation would be the cat is black. And just go with it for right now. Make sure you're paying attention. Okay, next. This all builds, so like these little things that don't seem important, it all comes together in a second. They show you this chart right here, and this is kind of where we're headed. Again, just building a lot of words here. Okay, so for conditional statement, it's the if P then Q, and the symbols are P arrow Q. Then for converse, it's if Q then P. They change the order. And the symbol would be Q with the arrow P. Then for inverse, This is where we use the negation. If not P, then not Q. And the symbols would have the squiggly line, meaning the negation or the not. And then the last one is contrapositive. If not Q, then not P, and it has the squiggly line. So the difference between these two is, okay, so we had P then Q, and then we had the negation, not P, then not Q. And then here we switched it Q, then P, and then not Q, then not P. And you'll see where this goes. Okay, continuing. So how do we use that? Here's an example of how it gets used. So let P be you are a guitar player, so that's P. And then Q be you are a musician. So based on that, you could say if you are a guitar player, then you are a musician, and that would be the conditional statement. So don't write this down, just kind of go through the concept. So conditional is P then Q. So if you're a guitar player, then you are a musician. The converse would be Q then P, so you switch it. If you're a musician, then you are a guitar player. Obviously, some of these statements aren't true, but it's the format or the process. Then for inverse, it's P then Q, so it's this order that's already written, but it's the not. So if you are not a guitar player, then you are not a musician. And then over here, contrapositive, where it's Q then P. If you are not a musician, then you are not a guitar player. And we just go through that. This is actually what the quarterly assessment practice test said would be on it. So we're going to practice this in a second. But yeah, just if you need an example, there it is. Continuing, so just kind of flip some pages. We're going to 115, the one with the dog on the bottom. Okay, so on this page, we're going to skip through. We're not going to do every problem, but we're just going to build the skills level to do those statements on our own. So where we're actually building to, we're going to start here on the first page, on the front, but where we're actually going is over here. This is actually what the practice test said would be on it, so we're building to that. But we're just going to build skills on this side. So here it says identify the hypothesis and conclusion. So we're just going to go through each one of these. So this would be the hypothesis. I'm just going to label it H. And the conclusion would be right here. If a polygon is a pentagon, so polygon is a pentagon would be the hypothesis. Conclusion, it has 5 sides. So for number 2, this would be the hypothesis. Conclusion. If you run, that's the hypothesis, then you are fast. Conclusion. You like math, hypothesis, then you like science. Okay, the next one we're going to write if-then statements. We're not going to do it for all of them, but just for certain ones. It has a hypothesis and conclusion. We just put it in the if-then format. So if 9x plus 5 equals 23, then x equals 2. So just write that. If 9x plus 5 equals 23, then x equals 2. Number 6, today is Friday and tomorrow is the weekend. So we could say if today is Friday, then tomorrow is the weekend. So those are pretty simple. We could just like plug it in. Sometimes it's a little bit more tricky. So for number 8, it says 2 right angles are supplementary. If 2 right angles, then they are like you sometimes have to add in words to make it make sense in the if-then. So I might say if 2 angles are right angles. If 2 angles are right angles, then they are supplementary. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes you do have to add a few words. Okay, continuing. Now we're going to look at the negation. So remember, negation is that like not P. So we're going to make it the opposite. So if we're told that the sky is blue, the negation would be the sky is not blue. Or for 12, the lake is cold. The not P would be the lake is not cold. Really, when we're saying like the negation, it's always like opposite, just like positives and negatives. So here it's saying the ball is not pink. The negation would be the ball is pink. And then for 14, the dog is not a Labrador, so we'd say, okay, the dog is a Labrador Retriever. Okay, now we're going to move to the back, which is exactly what we were told would be on the quarterly assessment. It's right here. However, there's really not enough room on this page to actually answer these. We aren't going to answer all of them. We're just going to choose a few to go through. So I actually want you to get out a blank sheet of lined paper. So take out a lined sheet of paper to do the writing on. Okay, so it says in the instructions, write the conditional statement P to Q, the converse Q to P, inverse not P to not Q, and the contrapositive not Q to not P in words. Then decide whether each statement is true or false. So starting with number 15, it tells us our P is 2 angles are supplementary, and then our Q is the measure of the angles sum to 180. So this is our Q, this is our P. So for number 15, it says it wants the conditional statement. Which is P to Q. And I'm actually going to just skip 2 lines. It says it wants the converse, which is Q to P. The inverse, and contrapositive. And from what I can tell on the review is that if they ask you for one of these, they'll also give you the symbols. So you can use the symbols to help you remember which one's which.
Can you move it up a little bit?
Yes. So now what we're doing is just making if-then statements and making them in this order or based on what it says. So I'm going to use abbreviations because we don't need to write every little word. So for P, it is 2 angles are supplementary. So if 2 angles are supplementary, then the measure of the angles sum to 180. So I'm going to write this in an if-then statement. If 2 angles are supplementary, then should I abbreviate? Then I'm going to abbreviate. Then they sum to 180. So instead of writing every word, I just kind of summarized what that said. Okay, so the converse, we have to put Q, then P. So it'll be if the measures of the angles sum to 180, then the 2 angles are supplementary. So just putting it in the other order. So if the angles sum to 180 degrees, then they are supplementary. So as you can see, I took out some of the fluff and made it shorter, but you get the idea. Now for the inverse, the not P to not Q, what I would recommend doing is looking back up at the conditional, which is in the order P to Q, and just putting nots in there. If two angles are not supplementary, then they do not sum to 180. So that's what I'm writing. Okay. And for contrapositive, it is not Q, then not P. So I'm going to go up to the converse, which was in the order Q, then P, and just put the knots in. So if the angles do not sum to 180, or do not add to 180, I don't know if that's proper grammar or not, but you get the idea, then they are not supplementary. So that is 15. Okay, so we are going to continue practicing. We'll do number 16 next. So we're going to have a conditional statement, which is P to Q, of a converse, which is Q to P, inverse, which is not P to not Q, and then contrapositive. So like I said, from what I can tell, if they ask you for, let's say, the converse, they'll give you P and Q. They'll say converse is Q to P, and then you just have to identify which one is that converse. So as long as you can use these symbols, you should be good. Okay, so 16, looking at the problem on the worksheet, 16, P is you are in math class, and then Q is you are in geometry. So that's what I'm using down here. Maybe I should even fold this so we can see it both in the frame. Okay, so for the conditional statement, if P, then Q. So I would say if you are in math class, then you are in geometry. And I'll abbreviate geometry as geo. Then you are in geo. The converse is Q, then P. So if you are in geometry, if you are in geo, then you are in math class. Have you seen anything like this in science yet? No. Okay, so the inverse is the not P, then not Q. So I'm going to go up to my conditional, which is P, then Q, which is in the right order, and just add the knots. If you are not in math class, then you are not in geo. last but not least, contrapositive is not Q, then not P. So I'm going to go up to the converse, which was Q, then P, and just put the knots in. If you are not in geo. Okay, we're going to do one more example. I'm actually going to flip my paper over because I don't have enough room at the bottom. Does everybody have this down? Okay. So I'm going to choose an example where it's like, remember how with the negation we could sometimes, most of the time you're saying, okay, if the sky is blue, then the sky is not blue. The negation is you put in a knot. Sometimes it's the other way around where you're starting out with a knot and then the negation is that it is. So I'm choosing number 18 because it has that situation. So for 18, our P is you are not an only child. And then Q is you have a sibling. So we're going to do the conditional, which is P then Q, the converse, Q then P, inverse, which is not P and not Q, and contrapositive. Okay, so then I'm just going to plug these in as is for the conditional. So if you are not an only child, then you have a sibling. So if you are not an only child, then you have a sibling. So just writing it as is. In the converse, you put Q first. So if you have a sibling, then you are not an only child. Okay, and then, so this is where it's nice to already have the conditional and converse written. For the inverse of P to Q, I'm just going to take out the knot and then add a knot into the second portion. So if you are an only child, then you do not have a sibling. And contrapositive, not Q, then not P. I'm going to go to the converse, which is in the right order, Q, then P, and just make it opposite. If you have a sibling, so I'm going to say if you do not have a sibling, then you are an only child. That's it. That's the lesson for today. That's what they added to geometry curriculum. I don't know. Okay. So I'm actually going to have you. I'm gonna have you turn it in, and then I should have actually enough time in class to get most of them back to you. I realize you're gonna have to staple this new piece of paper to your packet, so I'll pass around the staplers, staple it together, turn it in, and then you can get a laptop to work on Khan Academy. I know there's like 4 or 5 of you that are done with Khan Academy. If you're one of those 4 or 5 people that have all 10 done, you can get your phone. If you're not one of those 4 or 5 people, then get a computer, finish your Khan Academy. When you have all 10 Khan Academy done, then you can ask to get your phone and just vibe.